essentially my thoughts on the game, and then I'm sure people will be joining us in just a moment. Thanks, David, for being early. All right, so I'll just get started with essentially my thoughts on the game, and then I'm sure people will be joining us in just a moment. All right, so, and this might be a shorter space simply because even if we had our whole host of podcasters here with Saz, Abel, Favi. Um, there honestly isn't much to talk about that hasn't already been said, whether it be our tweets during the game, whether it be other, media outlets that have covered the game, but I'll do it anyway. So essentially, the big thing that stands out, of course, is the use/misuse of Jackson Ewell. Um, there are many players in world soccer that have had successful position changes, whether it be midfielders to defenders, wingers to fullbacks, or usually it's a little smaller position changes, like, from a defensive midfielder to an attacking midfielder, whatever. But that doesn't mean it always works. And the key thing is to understand when it doesn't work, when to stop. And usually the signs aren't as clear as they are in this instant. Jackson Ewell is not a center back. We mentioned this, that there is just no point in going through with this experiment anymore, I believe. It's just he was directly responsible, not the only one responsible, but he was for both goals scored by the Philadelphia Union. So in the first goal, in the buildup that led to the goal, Sergio Santos had a run on the wide side of the pitch. It was on the right side. Don't know where Paul Marie was, but it was Jackson Ewell versus Sergio Santos. And Jackson Ewell was just completely beat for pace, which is a problem if you're a center back. It's a bit more important to be fast as a center back than as a CDM because you are the last line of defense. If you're a CDM, it helps if you're fast, but it's not the end of the world because you have one other line of defense beyond you. But anyway, so Sergio Santos was able to do what he wanted. He got the ball to Corey Burke. Francisco Calvo wasn't necessarily helped there either. And that led to the opening goal. It was not great defense, something that we've said a lot with San Jose Earthquakes in the last however many seasons recently under Almeida. It's not going to be pretty if this season continues much longer and we're conceding 2 or 3 goals every game. Like, there has to be a game where the defense makes a stand and is able to be a bit more assertive for the entire 90 minutes. We've seen some flashes, like Francisco Calvo. He's either been really good or really bad in defense, but you need to have some of these games where over the course of 90 minutes that you can say, okay, this was an A or B plus level performance. Instead, we're giving a lot of C's and D's here, if not F's. As for the second goal, I try not to be overly critical when a handball results in a penalty because a lot of the times it can be really difficult in those situations. Many of you will remember the Champions League final that was essentially decided in the first minute because of a Musa Sissoko handball where he was directing traffic trying to get the defense in line and the ball happened to hit him. Liverpool gets a penalty, Salah puts it away, and Liverpool just cruised for that game. But in this case, and as Daniel Slayton said in the broadcast, and we'll get into how frustrating it was as well that the first half of this game wasn't available on a regular channel later in this Twitter space. But anyway, I completely agreed with Daniel Slayton's analysis there, where you can't argue that it's not handball. It sucks. It was a backbreaking moment for the Quakes there. They desperately needed something to go their way, and it just wasn't the case there. JT Marcinkowski did no chance on that penalty, went the wrong way. Daniel Gazdag went the left, he went right. And that was just on the defensive side of things. Those are all the problems with the defense in this side of the game. And we'll get into the offense. We do have Jerry here from Tectonic Takes as well. Jerry, how are you doing?
Hey, what's up, guys? Doing pretty good. Yeah, it was pretty much disappointing match yesterday for the Quicks, and like you said, on both sides, I believe, offense and defense, very poor, and lots of missing key players yesterday as well. So I think that affected the match as well. But we'll get into it more and see what we
Yeah,
have to say about this going forward.
right. And so there's a lot of different ways we can go from there. Let's talk about the key players that we're missing, and then we'll go into the offense. First, let's start with Nathan. And I've said this several times in the last month or so, watching the Golden State Warriors when they struggled defensively, and how everything was attributed to missing Draymond Green, their defensive linchpin. Much like Nathan is the glue that holds the defense together for the San Jose Earthquakes. You shouldn't have to rely on your best defender to do the basic things right. I don't like it when, yes, there's some players that are really integral to a team, and without them, naturally, your defense gets worse, or your offense gets worse, or something gets worse. But it can't be an excuse for everything that goes wrong. And I think even with Nathan in these games, if Nathan doesn't get hurt in the first game of the season, still think that Quakes end up conceding the majority of the 8 goals that they've conceded so far. It may be less than 8, but it's still going to be a problem. Nathan may make up for it with a goal or two on the other end, but those are still going to be goals from set piece situations, which is the entirety of the Quakes' offensive output here. And that brings me to Jamiro Montero. So this was a bummer for him to miss out. Obviously, he was a former Philadelphia Union player. He was very beloved by the Philadelphia Union fans, as we discussed on Wednesday when we had El Parcero join us. That they didn't want Montero to leave. They wanted him to still be a part of this Philadelphia Union team that is going places. Like, that is a team that was once in a position where the San Jose Earthquakes are now, where they're trying to be unmediocre, and they've managed to build a good team from the ground up through some under the radar transfers while they watched New York sign star players, both New York clubs, and they brought in some homegrowns as well. That's what San Jose Earthquakes has attempted to do, but it hasn't come together yet. So Jamiro Montero, without doubt, has been the best signing of the San Jose Earthquakes this offseason. And without him, with him suspended for this game, the defense definitely looked one dimensional. But the thing is, Jamiro Montero, he's been able to connect the passes within the attack. He's been able to be on the receiving end of those crosses and look dangerous. But can he do both? Is he really going to transform this attack and take it to the next level when you already have decent players on paper like Chofis and Christian Espinoza, Jeremy Abobasi, and you have some players who can contribute at this level with Kate Cal and Benji Kikanovic, as young as they are. They're already on in this squad, and they're still looking bad offensively. And this was a reply to Alex Morgan when he was talking about their offensive struggles. I told him that the Quakes offense was as effective as a normal type move on Gengar. Like, it did nothing to the Philadelphia Union. It was sad to see. So, with the offensive struggles, the goals conceded, they suck, and you'd rather, end the game 0-0, even if you don't score a goal when you're desperate for points, as the San Jose Earthquakes often found themselves to be, but it's not sustainable. It's definitely looking like that 3-3 game from the Columbus Crew. It was nice. It gave them some confidence back, and I'm not saying this was the worst performance ever. I'm not as doom and gloom after this Union loss as I was against New York Red Bulls, which sounds weird because now we've seen 3 more games. We've seen the sample size grow, and the improvement hasn't been there. And there's no excusing this performance still. However, I do think that there will be more opportunities for this team to improve. And I did appreciate how at in the second half we saw 3 Earthquakes player make their debuts with uh, Useni Buddha, Will Richmond, and Nico Sarkis. I believe I butchered that last name. Let me just give myself another chance to redeem myself. Sakiris. Sorry. There we go. So it's nice to see them getting involved. I think that's going to be important because, once again, the Quakes are not built with the depth that they need to do well in this league or any league, really. So that means that the depth that we do have with these youth players, that they're going to have to get involved and hopefully they learn fast. I mean, we've had some success with getting Cade Cowell, Menji Kikanovic. I like what we've seen with Siad Haji. Unfortunately, we haven't seen Haji enough due to injuries on this occasion, but in the past, just honestly getting overlooked. And Tanner Beeson is another one who has learned quickly and has been able to improve. And he's been so good that I am shocked that Tanner Beeson hasn't started a game yet when we are struggling to find center backs to start. Jackson Newell should not start the next game. The starting center back pairing should be Tanner Beeson and Francisco Calvo. It's simple. We have to play our best players in the positions that we have them in. So overall, probably the most disappointing performance in terms of where we expected this team to be with a few more games under their belt. But I do think that while partially it was because Philadelphia Union had control of this game and they decided to just take their foot off the gas and save some of the players for another day, noting their injury struggles in the forward position, I do think that the minutes that we did give to our younger players is going to be helpful. So I know Brian also requested to speak. So Brian, this is your opportunity if you wanted to say something.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How are you doing?
All right. Pretty good. Thanks. Glad to be on the call with you guys and hear your take on it. So I took some notes on what we were talking about. I watched the game yesterday. And this comes back to some tweets I made before. This is just not a good enough squad. The bottom line is the front office didn't do service to Matthias Almeida. He's seen success abroad with teams, but he's had a lot more talent in the teams. And while Cade Cowell is an excellent player and I really rate him, I don't think Jackson Newell is. Honestly, watching Jackson Newell over the last few years, it's been sort of disappointing that he is basically the U.S. men's national team MLS type player, which is just really second rate on the international scene. And in MLS, if you can't cut it in MLS, and he's doing things like having silly handballs in the box, that's sort of unacceptable at the top level. So that's the first thing I took down. And the defensive setup won't work without Nathan. So let's use the example of Liverpool, as you said before. In previous seasons, they had a lot of trouble, specifically when the center back got his knee blown out. I can't remember his damn name off the top of my head right now. But
Virgil van Dijk?
yeah, when Van Dijk got his knee blown out at Everton in the Merseyside Derby, the team took a fat dump. And what did they do? They moved their central midfielders into CBs and they rotated them through as long as they possibly could. And they still saw massive success. The reason is the depth of the squad. And quite frankly, the depth of the squad at San Jose is it's really appalling for a top league team. If you look at the front
Non-existent.
office, yes, it's pretty much, I mean, it's not non existent, but what they're doing is they're digging into local colleges to bring in local college players. And you see local, teams, especially like I'm in Fresno, we have the Fuego here, and they try and dig into the local JCs and they try and dig into local talents, but it's just, mediocrity at its finest, really, because the college system doesn't play well into the professional system. Even with very good players that come from overseas, play in our system, and then go back and see some, form of success. But that's the LFC example. And that's also, I'm just going through my notes, front office. And your comparison of San Jose to Philly is a little bit jarring for me. The reason I say that is not because I disagree with you totally, is because Philly has had ups and downs. San Jose has been very, very, very rough for the last literally almost decade now. They have literally the worst record in MLS over a 10-year span. And specifically over the last 5 years, they've been absolutely atrocious. Now, when you have a team that is year on year on year that bad, that comes down to recruitment, that comes down to filling in the lineup, that comes down to just having the bases met. So, for example, Nathan goes out, our defense falls to pieces. Is that Matias Almeida's fault for running a system? Partially. More so, it's the fault of the front office not listening to Almeida and bringing in a defensive player the likes of Nathan that can be an understudy or a backup instead of relying on Stanford for, well, I mean, I don't know if the players are any good or not, but college level players, which is not MLS level players. So that gets through the first bit, college level players. And this Philadelphia game was never going to be a good situation for San Jose. You're traveling literally across the country. You're playing in the snow, so the weather is a massive, massive problem. The travel is a massive, massive problem. And just having to deal with the season up till now, the strife from the front office, Matias Almeida, and everything on social media, and quite frankly, us when we're dogging on the players. And it's not wrong of us to dog on the players. This is our team. We need to show support, and we also need to get on people when it's other people's faults. In my opinion, particularly the front office's fault. Now, Beeson is for me, and Beeson and Nathan are probably our best defenders by a mile. I mean, Sergio Calvo is good, but not that good. He's definitely an off the bench guy for any MLS team. Montero up front, he is what is linking the team together, and he is probably the best recruitment that we have seen in the club probably in 4 or 5 years, withstanding pulling from our youth like Cade Cowell, and hopefully somebody comes from the youth system. What is it? The Earthquakes 2, or maybe one of the local colleges and just shows up to play. But yeah, it's hard to be positive in a situation like this. You can look at all the examples in the world, but the reality is if you don't have some kind of backup plan to plan A, and if you don't have a front office that supports your vision, then you've got a coach that's good, bad, indifferent, doesn't really matter. It just means that you have a squad that can't stand up to the rigorous season that's ahead of us. So we need to buckle up, and this is probably just going to keep going on. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome, Brian. And Danny, you just joined as a speaker, so would you like to share your thoughts as well?
Yeah. What's up, everybody? Just heads up, I'm driving the freeway, so if I get cut off or choppy, my apologies. But don't worry, I'm hands free. Yeah. What's up, everybody? Thanks for creating the space. First off, and yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like I believe Brian was saying this. Bringing in college level players like we saw yesterday, yes, it's great. Like, oh, hometown team, whatever. But just to reaffirm what everybody's been saying, the talent is not there. And unfortunately, with soccer, I feel like the college to professional um, league or system is just it isn't there, and it doesn't work for MLS. It doesn't work for soccer, and I feel like the biggest thing that the Earthquakes have to focus on is having somebody who can finish. For the past couple of seasons, we've been depending on Wanda Losky, but Wanda's not there, and even in the last 2 or 3 seasons, Wanda was not the person you wanted to rely on for scoring goals, and I feel like that's the number one issue we have right now with the Quakes.
Okay, looks like we lost Danny there. It might be just where he's driving on the freeway, but if wherever you end up next has a bit better reception, we'll hear from you in a little bit. And I think a lot of the problems with the transition from college to MLS is apparent. It's something that every MLS club, all 28 of them now, have to negotiate, and it seems like many of them, if not most of them, have found a better system than the Quakes have. I think with any situation where you have to assuage a level gap between college to professional, you ease those players in. It's unless they're really top talents coming out of college, which a few of them each year are. You can't just throw them into the deep end, and I think that's what uh, Almeida tried to do. We didn't see these players making their debut until the second half of the third game, and at some point you can't really test if they're ready until you find out the hard way. So there's never going to be a perfect time in that sense either. I think the problem for the San Jose Earthquakes is that the over reliance on those young players and the amount that they're taking on because of the lack of experienced players. And in some ways, they've tried to fix this. They've started to sign more players with MLS experience. Eric Remedi last season, Gregush Calvo, and Montero this season. That's great, but you're sort of, catching on to these trends a little too late compared to the rest of the league. I think going back to what I was thinking of, look at Philadelphia Union, for example. I mentioned that their biggest issue in this game was their strikers. So Julian Carranza, he was out due to suspension as well. Then you had um, Ure, the Danish striker, he was unavailable either. So they started their only healthy attackers in that front two, Corey Burke and Sergio Santos, and both of them throughout the match, they were, cramping up. They were still able to get a good amount of usage. Like they combined for that first goal, and then they didn't over rely on them. They managed to sub off Burke for Paxton Aronson in the second half. Sergio Santos ended up going the whole 90 minutes. But the fact is that when all those four attackers are healthy for Philadelphia Union, they're set in that position. We don't have that level of confidence and depth at San Jose Earthquakes, which is really frustrating, really, you know, annoying, but it's the same movie that San Jose Earthquakes fans have seen over and over again. It's why there's less attendance in this season, especially now that Chris Wondolowski isn't there. He was a big reason why Quakes fans kept going to games, even though that we still struggled with Wondolowski. Chris Wondolowski continued to show his worth, and he's a fan favorite. And while there's still some players that I think could reach fan favorite level, not at the level Chris Wondolowski, I don't think we'll see a player who even touches him in that category for a long time. But they're not there yet. And so if that isn't working to bring people to watch the games, to attend the games, then you have to make sure that the product on the pitch is good enough. But speaking of watching games, I think now is an important time to bring up this, mini rant. Every Quakes game, all 34 games, I don't know why this wasn't a thing. I feel like this should have been talked about when the TV contract was signed. Should be shown from start to finish on that NBC California channel. I don't know why that wasn't the case in this channel. And for this game, the first half was put in overflow. not because of a Warriors game or a Sharks game. The Warriors game was on ABC, but it was because of the pregame. No one cares. I'm a diehard Warriors fan, and I don't care if we have to skip one day of pregame so that we can see the Earthquakes game. I would rather we see that full Earthquakes game and, you know, let ABC handle the pregame for the Warriors Bucks game. If they're showcasing that game, they can handle the pregame. They can, they have plenty of analysts that they can handle that. The Earthquakes, they are the fifth. Actually, since there's still six Bay Area teams, the sixth biggest Bay Area sports team. So they need all the help they can get. They need that airtime. They deserve it. And the Warriors don't need any more help than they need to. So whoever's decision it was to put that Warriors pregame instead of the first half of the Earthquakes game, I didn't appreciate that decision. And I know a lot of you that are listening to this and all San Jose Earthquakes fans locally did not appreciate that. Plus, since it was on the Overflow channel, according to ESPN Plus, you still get the blackout market. So even though I'm one of the paying customers for ESPN Plus, and it's a great tool because I get to watch all the different MLS games throughout the day, that being unavailable to us as an alternate is also annoying as well, and that's something that has to be fixed with ESPN Plus. Jerry, Brian, how did you guys watch this game?
Yeah, similar to you, it was pretty frustrating to miss the first, basically the full first half of the game, and they get a play-by-play audio review of what happened. But in a way, I don't think the second half was much different than the first half. We saw some clips and highlights, and you can see stuff on YouTube, but it's going to be hard to reason that out because, quite frankly, the Earthquakes don't get the kind of revenue that the Warriors
Mm,
get, and you know might be fighting an uphill battle in that sense. What they could do is make a
yeah,
deal with ESPN and let us watch the whole game on ESPN Plus. I mean, it was completely blacked out on ESPN Plus. It was so frustrating.
right. And I think the blackout restrictions as well, they're very arbitrary, and I think they're very expansive. Like I've heard people say in like Nevada, both Reno and Vegas, that they've had blackout issues with Earthquakes games. I don't know what the deal is with Sacramento, like where they fit in this equation, but I feel like even that like shouldn't be a problem. And yeah, I would like to get to a point where someday ESPN Plus they can show, whether it be Earthquake, Sharks, A's, Giants, because I know they carry multiple sports, that there could be, a compromise with the local networks that they can show that as an alternate to cable. But I understand that the local broadcasters, they need to make money too. So there's no easy solution. It's just really frustrating and a slap in the face for fans, especially, it's good news for us as sports fans that baseball is coming back, but with baseball coming back, whatever opportunity, small window there was for San Jose Earthquakes to try to draw new fans in, you can't rely on that now. And with that situation, if someone is trying to watch an Earthquakes game and they come up with a frustrating situation such as this, that will discourage them from watching that game, and potentially, even if it shouldn't, because this doesn't happen too often, it discourages them from watching other games in the future. So that's something that I want to guard against. One last look at the Philadelphia Union side of things. So it's really impressive how they built this roster, as I mentioned. The defense is definitely stronger than their offense at this point in time. Let's take a look at, what I'm talking about. We all know their goalkeeper, Andre Blake. I was at the game in 2017 when USA faced Jamaica in the Gold Cup final over at Levi Stadium. And I was disappointed, even though obviously it meant that USA would have a better chance of winning that game. Obviously, I don't want anyone to get injured, especially not Andre Blake. He had to be subbed off in, I believe, the 30th minute because he broke his arm in that game. But during the time he was playing, he was a fantastic goalkeeper then, and he remains so now. Their back line is pretty much unchanged from last season. Kai Wagner, Jack Elliott, Jacob Glesnes, with the exception of they're using Nathan Harriel, a homegrown player at right back, more often than Olivier Mbaizo. And if you get through, first you have to get through their CDM, Jose Martinez, to get through the back line. And then to get through their back line, you have to get to Andre Blake. So it's no secret that even if the Quakes were firing on all cylinders in offense, that they're going to be in for a rough time offensively in this game, cracking that Philadelphia Union defensive unit. So I think Philadelphia Union, they got the 3 points that they were expected to get when we did the pre-game Twitter space. Pretty much everyone expected, even optimistic Quakes fans were expecting Philadelphia Union to win this game. It was a pretty cold affair, so all our friends, both Quakes fans who traveled to Philadelphia and the local Union fans who we spoke to on Wednesday and we keep in contact, they had a tough time with the weather, but for the Union fans, it was worth it. So they're going to be, moving on to the Eastern Conference. They have a decent points haul to start their season as they look to at least match their MLS Cup run last season. Ideally, go one step further. We wish them luck. But now looking forward to the San Jose Earthquakes. Definitely questions asked of a lot of players. I think, JT Marcinkowski, he's doing the best he can. I think he avoided having a howler than he did earlier this season, but still, his work is cut out for him as goalkeeper for this Quakes team right now. That back line, best case scenario, we just roll out Marie, Calvo, Beeson, Lopez for the Minnesota United game. But I still think we should have made a move on right back. No offense to Paul Marie, no offense to Tommy Thompson. I really appreciate them as players, as people, and they've been great contributors to this club. But we still haven't managed to get a right back that, in my opinion, has been as good as Nick Lima was by the time he left this club. And in this game, it was a 4-1-4-1, it looked like. So the one designated defensive midfielder was Eric Remedy. Remedy, please try not to get a yellow card every game. For the wingers, Christian Espinoza and Benji Kikanovic, I don't hate that combination there, but I think what could be done is we try to bring Benji Kikanovic off the bench. And this is something that I noticed from both teams, both Earthquakes and the Union, is that it's very inexperienced benches that both teams had. Philadelphia Union in particular, they had 6 or 7 homegrown players, which is really cool, but also, I'm sure they would like to, add to that experience level if they get the opportunity to. And likewise, San Jose Earthquakes should look to do similarly. With Jan Grey Goose, I think that he still earned his starting spot with that 2 assist performance in the Columbus Crew game, but hopefully we see more of that. A player who definitely needs a goal soon is Jeremy Ebobisse. I think Ebobisse, we know he's a good player. He's in a similar category as Hamir Montero, where Portland Timbers fans, they probably didn't need him as much as the Union felt like they needed Hamir Montero, but they still weren't happy that he left, and their loss is our gain. But Jeremy Ebobisse still hasn't really hit the ground running, and it's not entirely his fault. He has spurned some chances, but he also hasn't gotten the service that he needs to really take advantage of the opportunities that the Quakes need to carve out more of. So I'll turn it over once again. Jerry, do you have any other thoughts on if there's any other modifications to the personnel you'd like to see start the next game against Minnesota?
Yeah, definitely. I believe that, like you and Brian pretty much mentioned, already, we need to get Jackson Ewell out of that center back spot and put Beeson in there. I just hope that works out until Nathan comes back and makes that full recovery. I'm also not a big fan of Eric Remedi. I don't like him in that front position above the defenders. Um, I think that he's a little bit too slow, especially. We kind of dangerous when we face teams with speed and top players. So I like having that midfield more solid and not having that gap and space between the midfield and defenders, because that's been one of our weaknesses this season and this last season. That there's the gap between the midfield and defenders. It's they need to be more close together, and I think having probably a solid midfield. I'm not sure how to fix it up, whether it's four in the midfield or three and then one in front of them. But I think that will be a great option.
All right. Thank you. And that's pretty much our thoughts on the match. I think it's a good thing in a sense that the Quakes get one more opportunity on the road against Minnesota United. It's going to be tough to judge that game because Minnesota United, they have had our number. So it's a very good chance that they might beat us too. However, an improved performance is important, and how they play against Minnesota United, if they can start to score goals from open play, if they can look more dangerous, if they can shore up their back line a bit, if the selections can be a bit more sound, if we can see that Tanner Beeson, Francisco Calvo partnership, I think that would be encouraging for uh, fans to want to come back to the next home game, which is against Austin. So this is going to be an opportunity. Like, it's a lot less committal to watch a game from TV, especially on the road. Um, we are in the comfort of our houses in better weather here in California, so we'll be enjoying the action from St. Paul, Minnesota from afar. Hopefully, our friends over at the Final Third podcast, who I'm hoping that we'll be able to talk to about this game later this week, will be bundled up when they attend this game. But yeah, I think just because we're on the road, I don't want you to wave the white flag and be like, okay, Minnesota, here's your 3 points. We're going to go back to San Jose now. Like, we have to see an improvement there. And, it's all relative. If you're playing pretty badly, improvement shouldn't be as hard to achieve. But it is going to be apparent what kind of Quakes team can be able to be viewed this season. I said that very awfully, but you get my point. Eli, you wanted to share some thoughts?
Yeah, the first three games we're fortunate enough to be facing East Coast teams or teams that are in the Eastern Conference now. Face starting with Minnesota, these are 6-point games. So I kind of want to stop with this kind of this testing phase, right? We saw 3 games of what it seemed like 6 in the midfield, you know, and it's kind of like do or die all the time. Um, if we can get ourselves into a formation with that favors everybody, right? I mean, we don't have to have our best players playing all the time, right? We can. It's nice to have 2 people at all the way across our midfield, that can sub in and out, 2 quality midfielders. Let's leverage that, right? It shouldn't be just a do or die every time, and try to force everybody onto the field where it becomes, these are our best 11 players or more skillful players. That way we can, rely less on these college guys, right? We shouldn't have, a 16-year-old coming off the bench. This against Philly, but it's a situation where if we have 3 quality players that can, or 6 quality guys in the midfield, let's make that work. It shouldn't always be do or die.
What would your midfield ideally be for the Minnesota game?
I'm always the most mobile guys. I like Jan. He's not the, I guess, not the fastest guy, but he knows Minnesota, right? He played with them before. You know,
Right.
I'm a big guy. I'm a big proponent on Eric Meddy. I like the way he pivots the ball, and he's always looking forward. And have either Trophies or Montero play at the top of that three, maybe like a 4-3-3 or something. But it shouldn't be like a two, like three in the back, five midfielders and two attackers.
Right. So I think you're just looking for more consistency in a proven formation that isn't trying to ask too much out of the midfielders.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems that we're trying to force all our best players out on the field. It's okay not to have everybody out. That increases competition. Out in the practice field. If we have five players for three spots, let's just allow the best three guys to play out there, whoever it was during the week or during the practice week.
Right. Play the hot hand. And this is something that our guest from the Columbus Crew game, TK, spoke about, where it almost doesn't matter who starts up top for them between Yassi Zardes and Miguel Berry, because they're confident in whoever they start, that the person who doesn't start is capable to come off the bench if they still need a goal. And that's something that we'd like to see more of from the San Jose Earthquakes, to have that confidence, knowing that if we need a plan B, we have a solid plan B. And thank you, Eli, for your thoughts. I also want to give an opportunity for our remaining listeners as well. If you have a question or some thoughts you'd like to share, feel free to request to become a speaker. I'll happily do so. And then we'll start to wrap up this Twitter space, because we've all seen the game. We all know what could have improved, and we've all discussed that at nauseum at this point. So there's unfortunately not much left to analyze. Only things that we can hope for, add to our San Jose Earthquakes fans' wish list, that things could get better. All right, if that's the Brian.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in, because I know I was pretty negative earlier, that hopefully against Minnesota we come out all guns firing. Montero comes out, he's playing good. Whatever changes Matthias makes in the defense starts clicking, and Remedi can start turning the ball over a little bit quicker in midfield. He is a little bit slow, but he has that quality to spray it out to the right kind of people. And if he links up on some kind of forward-based double pivot with Montero, it can be very, very good and beneficial for us, especially when we push our fullbacks up as wingers like we do. And it could create a lot of problems for Minnesota. And Minnesota, like you said, is sort of ups and downs. So I think we have more of a chance than we had against Philadelphia for sure. And yeah, just hope for good things.
Right. It's hard to gauge Minnesota beyond them being our bogey team. Looking at their squad, there's not too many names that pop out at you, but they have some good players. I think their DPs, especially Luis Amaria and Emmanuel Reynoso, they're going to be pretty tough to handle. They also got Franco Fragapane and Robin Lode, so offensively, they're going to be a handful for us defensively. So we have to be careful about that. And also important, as we've all experienced the U.S. men's national team game in Minnesota recently, is we're going to be checking the weather. As of now, it looks like the forecast for Saturday, March 19th in St. Paul, Minnesota, it's looking like a high of 52 degrees Fahrenheit, a low of 33 degrees Celsius. So it'll get close to, if not below, freezing temperatures. There's going to be some chance of precipitation, which of course will become snow. And that's going to be something to keep an eye on. And I do hope that we can be more on the front foot and try to establish that tempo early. But of course, this being a road game and the potential weather in this game, Brian, we'll see how it goes. It's going to be even chillier than it was in Philadelphia, so we'll see how that plays out. But ultimately, this is MLS. You're going to deal with the cold of Minnesota. You're going to deal with the tropics of Florida. You're going to deal with the Texas heat. You have to deal with the Portland rain. It's part of the job description here. And ultimately, I think San Jose Earthquakes, they just have to get it together. It sounds pretty, crappy coming from us as fans. Like, we're watching the games, they're playing it, but we expect more because we know they're capable of more. That's the tough love aspect of things, and that's what I, am going to continue to manifest into existence. As we wrap up this Twitter space, just a few other details here to consider in the soccer world. So, USL Championship started this weekend with a mixed bag of results for the California teams. To focus a little bit on the NorCal side of things, it could have been a better start for the Oakland Roots. They lost 1-0 to Rio Grande Valley. And then Sacramento Republic, their opening game was against El Paso Locomotive. They did win. While also the debutants of Monterey Bay, granted they're relocated from Fresno, they were down 4-0 Phoenix Rising. It could have gotten ugly. They managed to claw their way back into a more respectable 4-2 loss. So I encourage you all, San Jose Earthquakes are going to be our priority, but definitely check out the USL Championship this season, whether you want to follow the Oakland Roots. If you're in the Sacramento area, probably Sacramento Republic, or even check out Monterey Bay. Those are all viable options to support. And if you're not already in our fantasy league, feel free to join us. I can send you a link if you can DM me. The top scorer this week so far, surprisingly, with only 0.38% ownership, was Bill Tuiloma from Portland. So if you managed to start him, good for you. Otherwise, I'm sure he'll be a popular choice. We're going to try bring in the final third, one of the two co-hosts from there, to talk about the Minnesota United game. We're still figuring out scheduling. Stay tuned for news on that. I think we've kind of established a pattern for these Tectonic Takes Twitter spaces for this season. Definitely on the Sunday side of things, we're going to be here at 3 p.m. Pacific most days, as long as we continue to play Saturday games. If we are scheduled for a Sunday game, we might do it Sunday night. And for the midweek, we think we'll still continue with Wednesday night Twitter spaces, or Wednesday afternoons. 4 p.m. is what we've been going for recently on Wednesdays for the game previews. Again, this will be tentative based on once we get the double game weeks. But as for the single game match weeks, that's going to be what we're looking at as of now. And Favi also did inform us that he's going to, take a break from the Tectonic Takes for the time being. He just has to take care of a few other things. So you may not hear from him in these spaces too many times the next month. But after that, he should be back in action. And he'll let you know on Twitter, and we'll let you know what you can expect. But for now, you'll continue to hear from me, Ivan, as well as some combination of Abel, Saz, or Abel, Saz, Jerry, and Jason. And we'll continue to provide good content for you through the Twitter spaces and social media and our Discord server and other things that we have planned. Our next game, Minnesota United is hosting us. That'll be 5 p.m. Pacific. That will be on NBC California and ESPN Plus if you're out of market. Go Quakes, and have a great rest of your day and weekend. Thank you all for joining us on this Twitter space.